Howdy. Yes, I am. Carmack?
Hi,
Howdy.
good
Good
morning.
morning.
We've got some coffee. Help yourself.
Because it was
Thank you.
There's an apple.
These ones are amazing.
There's some more ones.
Yes, that is whoever came up with that. They need a hug and maybe a reprimand.
You love and hate them for that.
I'm gonna give myself a diabetic coma with these things.
Hi, good morning. Welcome. Help yourself. We've got donuts and coffee. Chocolate and caffeine twist.
Twist it, but I don't like to touch the other people's cups.
It's okay. Yeah, there you go.
I understand your thinking.
I actually have a.
Dark roast, light roast, decaf.
What's the difference between them?
No difference. Just cups. This is dark roast. This is light roast. That's decaf. On the coffee itself.
Okay.
I actually discovered.
You want me to pour for you?
Yeah, do I look like I have no
Well, your hands
extra-
are full. That's okay.
Yeah,
Just say
well,
when.
When? Thank you.
Okay, this dark? Oh yeah. Can I trade you?
What kind of donuts are these?
These are Mr.
So-
D's. We got all of the above. Pretty much.
I discovered a procedure to get a cup without touching the inside of anyone else's or the lip. What you do, pick up the entire stack, squeezing it so it doesn't fall, and then grab yours from the inside.
That makes sense.
You might get more than one, but if you do, the other ones you can pick up from the outside of the cup.
Then they're clean.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Okay.
I'm gonna put the lid back on this one just to see if it keeps it warmer.
Thank you.
Time out of their Saturday morning to be here. We really do appreciate it and the effort that they make. And then I want to thank the community members that are here too. They're doing the same. If you want to, actually, let's get started with some housekeeping. So if you want to submit a question, there are note cards on your seat. That is how you can ask a question. Please write legibly. You can't ask your question if I can't read it. And then also, please write your question in the form of a question. You can't ask it if it's not a
I don't want to take your seat.
So we would also ask that
My
you
husband's
refrain
coming
from commenting out
He's the
loud,
second person with
clapping, and definitely
He's the
booing,
second
no
person with me,
booing.
my husband.
Here?
Oh yeah.
We want to keep things moving, and that just helps things go quickly and keep us on track.
It's up
And
to you.
then we also like to note that we do invite every legislator with constituents in Johnson County to participate at these.
Thank you so much.
Let's just move
Next
down.
is our timekeeper. Our timekeeper is right up front. She's gonna keep us on track, keep me honest. And we're gonna start with 3 minutes for each legislator to open and introduce themselves. So I would propose we just start and go right to left. Yep, okay, does that sound good? And then before we do that, I'd like to share that there was a recent opinion poll in March of 2025 that found 72% of Americans desire to be part of the solution in restoring stability to our country, and that 80% of us believe we can settle differences without personal attack. And I would like this event to be an example of that.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you for hosting, of course. My name is Representative Heather Meyer. I represent House District 29, which is essentially central Overland Park between around 99th and Metcalf down to 135th and Metcalf, goes over to Antioch and 69 Highway, kind of. I am currently ranking minority member on the Federal and State Affairs Committee. I also serve on House Health and Human Services, as well as House Elections, which is a doozy, and House Insurance. I'm really excited to be here. I am very excited to hear your questions and tell you about what it's been like out there this session. It has, like I said, it's been really interesting, and a few of our committees have been very controversial. So I'm excited to hear from you and to answer your questions. Thank you.
Sorry, it's tough to tell what these things are on. I don't usually need a microphone. I'm Representative Stephanie Sawyer Clayton. I represent the area from Metcalf to State Line, 83rd to 103rd, unless you are east of Mission, and then it is Somerset to 95th. I have been representing folks in that area for, this is my 14th legislative session, so I've seen a lot of weird stuff that can't be unseen. The committees that I serve on are Federal and State Affairs with Representative Meyer. I'm the ranking minority member on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, and I also serve on the Taxation Committee. I serve as vice chair of our only nonpartisan committee, or at least it's supposed to be, the Rules and Procedure Committee. So we don't talk a lot about parliamentary procedure, but I might talk about that this morning, because we do have a lot of major issues that are going through where it causes a real chilling effect on a lot of the important legislation and amendments and discussions that need to go through. So grateful to being here, to you all for having me here today. Sorry, I didn't know that this was just a pants-only event, so sorry about the way that I dressed. I dress nice because I respect you guys, but my bad. Anyway, thanks for having me. We'll kind of get through this and looking forward to your questions.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Brandon Woodard. I represent the 108th District, which is parts of Lenexa, Olathe, and Overland Park. So 87th Street down to 127th Street between Renner is the western border, and I go all the way over to I-35. And then there's a big old weird carve out, so I look like it should actually be District number 7 because the shape of the district. I am the House Minority Leader and I'm surviving week 5 of the legislative session. And so as leader, you're typically not on committees, but when the last election happened, we lost 3 seats in the House and yet retained the same number of committee slots. And so I am the brand new member to the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. As I told the folks on that committee when they introduced, AKA roasted me, that I spent every summer on my aunt's farm, but I was the pool boy, so I was excited to learn more from them. And so this session's really been a rocky one. The procedure and the rule book is out the window, apparently, according to leadership, and the pace is such that I think the only people, if you polled all 165 legislators, the only 2 people that like the pace and the procedure that we're following are the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. So it's a doozy. Looking forward to your questions and happy to be here.
I'm State Senator Ethan Corson. I represent all or part of 10 cities in Northeast Johnson County. So my district starts on the Johnson side of the Johnson-Wyandotte line on 47th, and we go out south to 95th Street, and then we go from state line to about 6 blocks west of Metcalf. I just want to say thank you to the Johnson County Library, thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this. This is an incredible opportunity, and I also just think it is a real testament to our community that these are so well attended, that we have such an informed community that really wants to understand what is going on in the legislature. I particularly love this location because my mom worked here growing up. My mom was an information specialist at the library here, so I spent a lot of hours here while she was at work, so it's great being back here, in particular in this capacity. So this week, I'll kind of start just with where we are in terms of timeline in the legislature. So this is, this coming week is what we call turnaround week in the legislature. And so what that means is that for the most part, we will not be meeting in committees this week. Some committees will meet on Monday, but for the most part, we won't be meeting in committees. And we will be on the floor debating and voting on bills on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And with some exceptions, and there are some important exceptions, if a bill has not passed, if a Senate bill has not passed the Senate by the end of the week, and if a House bill has not passed the House by the end of the week, those bills are generally considered to be dead for the legislative session. And then when we come back from turnaround, the Senate will start working on all the bills that the House passed, and the House will start working on all of the bills that the Senate passed. So this is going to be one of the most important weeks in the legislature. I'm the ranking Democrat on the Senate Transportation, Tax, and Judiciary Committee. I will say both kind of as a general overview of kind of how I feel the session has gone, and I should probably know better, given that this is my 6th legislative session, but I always do feel like there is a sort of a bait and switch that happens with leadership in the other party, which is in November and December before the session starts. We always hear, this is gonna be the session where we're gonna really be focused on cost of living. And this is gonna be the session that we're really gonna be focused on property tax relief. And then almost as soon as the gavel bangs down to start the new session, we are just plunging right into whatever the latest culture war is. So I would love to see us more focused on kitchen table issues, how to make Kansas more affordable for folks, how to bring more jobs here, how to make sure we have great public schools, and those are things that I've tried to advance this session.
We have our first question, and I don't have any other questions, so I don't know if we're getting them in or they're getting backlogged. What steps do you support for more affordable housing in Johnson County for public school employees and other critical first responders to work and live in the Johnson County area?
I'm happy to answer that. For years, I have been the sponsor of a bill that brings back the homestead exemption for renters. So this is something that we had in place in Kansas starting in 1978 with the Brownback tax plan. That was one of the things that ended up on the cutting room floor. We've been able to bring back the homestead exemption and bring it up for certain levels for homeowners, but it is for renters, especially in Johnson County, where you get those main cost issues. So that is one thing that I've been proud to be a champion of. We've had hearings for it at least twice in House Tax, and it doesn't seem to move forward. I am not averse to adding it to any of our property tax bills, probably on the floor. And we'll talk a little bit more about property tax in general. There's a pretty big bill that we will be working on Monday, but that's one of the things I'm proud of working on.
Ditto that, and there's also a number of really good housing bills that have been introduced. There's a couple that are not so great as well, but it does seem like the momentum are behind the ones that is easy as like accepting partial payments. I was a good example. When my new lease began and my rent increased, I was still on auto pay for the former amount, and because of that I got a nasty gram. But they also prevented me from being able to make an additional partial payment, and because they're not required to do that. There's a few others that are making their way. I think we'll see some changes to those, but there was a lot of work during the interim last summer and fall, which those used to be interim committees just so people could, come back to the State House. I was proud that our folks on those committees actually did some really, really good work to come up with bipartisan solutions so we can get passed this year.
Yeah, due to both. Actually, there are some really great bills coming through. Speaking of the partial payment one as well, so there's a lot of need for us to be able to offer partial payments to folks, especially because occasionally they'll need partial payments from different social service organizations, domestic violence shelters, things like that. And landlords don't necessarily have to take those. And so this is one of the ways that we can really make sure that people can stay in their housing and really make it affordable for folks. As a social worker, I clearly don't have a high income, and so Workforce Solutions for things like rent and payments and things like that are really important. And I've seen, through my work as a social worker, how critical it is for people to be able to access these programs in order to maintain their housing. We also have a bill that talks about expunging the evictions after a certain amount of time, which is very important for people to be able to get into housing again. And I'm really excited about that one, and hopefully we can get that across the line.
And I agree with everything that has been said by all my colleagues. I think one thing that we really need to focus on as a state that we don't have an intentional strategy around in the way that we need to is we just need to build more housing. I think fundamentally we have a major supply and demand problem. The best way that we can bring down the cost of housing and make it more affordable and accessible is by building more middle-class housing. So there was a study done that shows that we need to be building, just to keep pace with demand, about 100,000 new homes a year. We need to be building about 5,000 in rural Kansas. We need to be building about 95,000 in the urban, suburban parts of Kansas. And I think if we're able to do that, we're gonna be able to put some downward pressure on prices of homes. And so I think we need to be more intentional as a state legislature about how we do that. Because I think it's really important for all of us that we wanna be a state where our cops, our teachers, our firefighters, nurses, social workers, skilled laborers are able to work and live in the same community, where you don't have to work in one community and live in another community. And I think that the best way we can get there is by having a real focus on how we can increase the supply side.
Can we keep Overland Park out of the Chiefs Stadium Star Bond District?
That's for me. Okay, so I am the ranking minority member, I stated earlier, on the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. And so the Chiefs situation has a lot of behind the scenes moving parts, because there was a vote that took place in the summer of 2024 where we took a vote to allow for the expansion of star bonds. I can't remember how everyone else up here voted. I voted yes because I put the trust in our governor and our commerce secretary to make a good deal. Now, as we've seen things coming through, there are a lot of the star bond districts, at least the maps that we have seen, look pretty big. Now, currently, at least based on what we know, I think it includes all of Wyandotte County, a huge chunk of, is it all of Lenexa or just all of Lenexa, all of Shawnee and Olathe. Overland Park is not currently in it. Now, we have been told that the actual borders of the Star Bonds district will not be set until October. That will be after session is over, hopefully. So that's one of the problems, is that we as legislators do not know. Now, there was a Star Bonds bill that got voted out of the House Commerce Committee. It could be combined with a Sports Authority bill, so we will have at least one, maybe two more votes on potential Chiefs-related issues, but it is my understanding legislators will not be privy to how those Star Bond district borders, the finalized ones, look. We won't know that until October. Definitely let us know how you feel about that, though, because I'm curious to hear more.
We're gonna jump back to housing affordability. Zoning laws affect housing affordability and availability. Does the legislature have a way to change zoning laws?
I mean, I can do this as well. So we have, and I cannot recall the exact bill number, but we've seen a fair amount of preemption bills when it comes to some zoning, in particular ADUs, and so those are those separate units, kind of what we would call, accessible dwelling units. That sometimes we call it like a mother-in-law suite, things like that. And so I know that there is at least one preemption bill that would change some zoning laws, but I don't know how far it would go. So yes, even though we have constitutional home rule for our local governments, the state seems to love to supersede that all the time. So I don't know if I've seen a lot of it move in committee, but I think that there is at least one bill that does that.
Yeah, and I think anything that we do when it comes to zoning, it has to involve our counties and our cities, and we have to come up with something that we can all agree on. The legislature does love to do everyone else's job for them, but we do have locally elected folks for those purposes.
Yeah, I would like to echo that as well. I think that respecting local home rule is one of the most important things we can do, especially when it comes to zoning and housing across the state. We know that our local municipalities and the people who live in our communities know more about what we need than people in the legislature, so we want to keep it that way.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I would be open for discussion if there's ways to improve the process, but I also think it's an area that we probably want to tread very cautiously in, because I think that a bunch of legislators from Johnson County may not have the best sense of what zoning needs need to be in Concordia, and I think legislators from Goodland may not have the best sense of what zoning needs need to be in Johnson County and vice versa. So I do think we want to try to, as much as possible, protect the ability of local communities to make the decisions that their locally elected officials feel like are most appropriate for the needs and the wishes of their citizens.
Before we get to the next question, I see a lot of people in the back. I just want to invite you, there are lots of seats here. It's okay if your head's in the camera for 1 second, I promise. Can you please give an update on current anti-trans legislation that has been pushed through the legislature? Now that Governor Kelly has vetoed, what can we expect next?
So the problem with this rushed process is that you're getting bills introduced one day at 11 a.m., sent to committee the later that day, scheduled for a hearing the next morning, and you have less than 24 hours notice to submit your testimony. Because of that, it's not allowing the public time to read legislation. It's not allowing the attorneys that work for several of the folks that are coming to testify to actually dig in to see the unintended consequences of the bill. And so yesterday afternoon, Governor Kelly did veto Senate Bill 244, which started out as a bill because, once again, we're not apparently focused on affordable housing or making it more affordable to live in Kansas. We're focused on making sure that the 400 trans folks that have changed their driver's license have to be, their driver's license is invalidated and they have to get new ones that reflect the sex assigned at birth. That then fast forwarded to a huge balloon amendment that changed it to not only include that part of the legislation, but also look at private gendered spaces. So basically, AKA the bathroom bounty bill. The problem with the way it's written is that not only does it apply to restrooms that are multi-occupancy, but it also applies to your dorm rooms, to nursing homes. And so if there is a gendered shared nursing home space and you want to go see your grandma and you're a man, you cannot do that under the way the bill was written. If you are going to visit your sister in the dorm room, you would not be allowed in the dorm room. And so thankfully, Governor Kelly did veto that bill. We are actively working tirelessly over the weekend to see if there are 5 Republicans that are willing to sustain that. And the conversations we've had with them is that, look, we're gonna oppose any additional bills, but you really gotta go rewrite this in a way that's not gonna impact people so negatively. It was so rushed that they forgot to include a severability clause, and so they had to add that to the floor because they know much of the bill is unconstitutional and will get struck down in court.
Yeah, Brandon covered that in detail pretty well, but again, obviously I've been out there fighting for trans rights for a really long time. I think I'm pretty well known for that. And to echo that same sentiment, we really haven't been able to get much legislation through that's actually going to help with kitchen table issues at all. And instead we're focusing on attacking a minority of our population that is already vulnerable and feels marginalized. And these are not the kinds of things that we should be doing in the state legislature or across the state whatsoever. And it just drives home the fact that legislators are not really listening to the will and the needs of the people. And it's sad and it's terrifying, frankly. There's a vendetta against a certain type of population for absolutely no reason. I think that I personally have tried to educate other legislators from across the aisle about trans rights issues, LGBTQ issues in general, and privately they'll say, well, yes, we understand and we agree with you, but then publicly they make these votes and they let this legislation through. And it's just a lack of backbone. Now, I'm not saying that it's all of them, but what I'm saying is that they really need to hear from people in the community who find this absolutely ridiculous and tell them, hey, grow a spine. Stand up for people in our community and stop fighting for these issues that really are just gonna hurt people and aren't gonna make a difference for the vast majority of Kansans. So obviously I'm, gonna support the veto, but we need your help in convincing others to do so as well.
I am going to speak to this just for a moment. Sorry, I had to stand. This stool is killing me. But in any case, so when it comes to bills like this, there was, as Representative Woodard said, I almost called him Woodard, I just call everyone by their last names up there. But we had an amendment that moved it so that it dropped the age of an opposite sex child going into a non-family restroom with a parent. It used to be 12 and then it dropped it down to 9. Well, so not everywhere has a family restroom. A lot of us who have raised kids are, well aware of this. And so now you have very young children that are having to, a little 9-year-old boy having to go into the men's room, which in some cases is pretty yikes at certain areas, with no offense to our male allies here, right? But I think the important thing is that it's not just the issue of trans rights, it is the issue of going against parental decisions, going against common sense, like visiting people in dorms and nursing homes. And the reason why these bills are successful, these wedge issues are successful, is because they are playing on our fears about privacy and about getting attacked. And again, not to male bash here, but a lot of the people who are doing the attacking are not people who are trans. They are, it's men who are doing it. And so I think one of the things, I proposed an amendment on the floor that would have said, all right, if we're looking at privacy, then no nudity in these semi-public spaces. All showers should be private. All changing rooms should be private. No one needs to be seeing anyone's business, regardless of their gender identity. So I think if we just work on adopting a never nude policy, seriously, we will end up keeping a lot of people safe, but that makes them mad. It removes the wedge issue, and therein lies the problem. That's what this is. It's not real policy, it's a wedge issue.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, myself and all my colleagues up here, we've really been laser focused on trying to be responsive to what our constituents have said. I mean, I've done a lot of listening to folks all across the state. Leader Woodard and all the House colleagues did a really robust listening tour that they spent all last session focused on, and really tried to build a policy agenda that was focused on the feedback that they received during that listening tour. I introduced 8 pieces of legislation that are all in the Senate Tax Committee on how we can make Kansas more affordable for folks. All of these folks have led on those issues as well. And so it's just, again, incredibly disappointing that we're not focused on the things that people are telling us that they want us to be focused on. Only one of my bills on affordability is even at a hearing in the Senate Tax Committee. Again, I know Representative Clayton mentioned homestead for renters, all of these things that were really needed and would really actually make a very tangible difference in the real lives of many real Kansans, are not being heard in the way that they should.
I have a couple of voting questions. How do you plan to deal with voter ID laws or bills that prevent married women from voting?
I got this. So elections committee, huh? We've seen a lot of really, really awful bills come through here. I know I only have a couple minutes to speak on this. I could go on and on. But it's really, to get to that point, how are we dealing with it? Well, we're fighting it in committee, and we're also gonna fight it on the floor if it comes above the line. The issue, though, at hand really is that we have a chair of the elections committee who is also running in a primary for the Secretary of State. And so what he has done is he has brought a load of really terrible bills through the committee, forced us to work them with absolutely zero proponents, most of them with proponents from out of state, many of them with more than 80 to 100 opponents to these bills. And he's essentially using it as a platform for his campaign. And I'm just gonna be real about that. That's what this is. So he's using state taxpayer dollars to author these bills, to do amendments in the sloppiest process I've ever seen in committee, and then pushing these bills through without any real support. So yeah, on these elections bills, we're gonna fight hard against them. We know what this means, and we know that the chair of the committee and his colleagues are not really looking towards the future and what's gonna happen. Most of these election bills that have come through are gonna be challenged. And that's another ton of money that we're gonna spend unnecessarily. And it's just so that one man can, have clips for his campaign for Secretary of State. And that is just, it's frustrating and it's disgusting. I encourage you all to watch those committee hearings to see what I'm talking about. You'll notice that in these hearings, there's only 4 of us Democrats on the committee. They have structured it so that we no longer really have a voice. We are cut off in the middle of our comments and our questions. We are only offered 1 question per conferee. And the conferees who are there opposing these bills, of which I said there are many, but often we don't have a lot of oral testimony, they are only given a few minutes to speak, whereas the out-of-state conferees who are proponents, if there are proponents of the bill, are offered as much time as they need. So it's really disturbing, and I know that I've got my time, but if you'd like to talk more about it later, I would be happy to.
I would just add, I was ranking minority member on the elections last term, and the difference is so stark. Chairman Proctor, while we adamantly disagree on so many issues, was very reasonable when it came to some of the most egregious elections bills. That being said, I want to commend our really badass fighters on the elections committee who are putting up with so much stuff. But in the House, we do have a number of really reasonable folks that are usually with us on opposing these bad election bills. They did succeed in getting the 3-day grace period removal through, but a lot of, even just this week, there was a driver's license bill that would require you to have the immigration status of someone on their driver's license. If they're non-citizen, there'd be a marker for that. That did not have a veto-proof majority. So we have enough reasonable folks on both some rural conservatives and some vulnerable suburban Republicans that continue to vote with us on opposing some of the most egregious elections bills.
Can you comment on a proposal for a state level electoral college?
I don't really know.
Is that,
Yeah, has that been introduced? But although I think part of the reason why a lot of us are not seeing a lot of these bills is that I saw a bill number that was 2,700.
Yeah.
So usually what happens in each biennium, the very first bill is Bill 2000. So now we're into the second year of our biennium. This is coming up so incredibly high that I think a lot of these bills are just being introduced sort of like a buzzsaw and are not necessarily seeing hearing, which my guess would be a state level electoral college would be to take power away from Johnson County, which has all the money and all the people. Certainly people complain about this, and I say this on the floor so much that people laugh, but Johnson County, they don't like us, but they sure do like our money. There is a strong push to disenfranchise our part of the state, in particular the Kansas City area, because they do not understand why we elect, mostly pretty moderate candidates, regardless of what side of the aisle we're on. There is a history of us electing fiscally conservative, socially liberal, middle of the road, reasonable candidates. And the problem is, though, is that because of gerrymandering, you have a very red center, a very conservative center of control, of power, and you don't have a lot of political power in Johnson County. So that's why you see that push. I do thankfully think that because we are up to the turnaround deadline, unless that has been worked in Senate, Fed, and state, I doubt that it would come through, but I would strongly oppose that because one person, one vote, it is the purity of the situation, and a statewide electoral college, that's just being weak. So the people are located here, the money is located here. We're not asking to have more power, just the same equal power as the rest of the state.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay, please no.
I absolutely agree with Representative Clayton here, and no, we have not worked a bill of that nature in Elections Committee, but again, we've had so many bills come through that we don't even, we can't even barely keep track of. I thought I heard whispers of this bill at some point. I don't know much about it, but I would agree completely with Representative Clayton. We do not need a state level electoral college.
And I just want to know, it looks like it says HR to me, so House Resolution 5027 maybe, but that didn't seem right, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it would need constitutional change, so that makes sense that it would be a House resolution, but I don't even know what committee it's in, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that it's not on our radar, because a lot of times people just put in these bills and then they go nowhere. It's sad when it happens to us, but it doesn't seem to bother me at all when it happens to bad, harmful bills. And that would be the case. Again, if we notice any change as we go in further into the session, but again, I'm not about to let people try to disenfranchise Johnson County, not while there's breath in my body.
The Trump administration is temporary, but global warming and species extinction is permanent and increasing. What legislation would you support that would reduce Kansas's greenhouse gas emissions?
I wish Rishu or Lindsey Vaughn were here because they are our experts, and that might seem like a cop-out, but the reality is the work that you're able to achieve and the work you're able to do is because of the committee assignments that you're on. Lindsey Vaughn is our I think we're in her district right here. She is our ranking on water and has worked with this bipartisan coalition. And I'm going to use some of my time to tell a fun story. When she was going to run for office, I was like, Lindsey, you think anything west of Lawrence is Western Kansas? So we got in the car, we traveled all over the state to some of Marcy Penner's most recommended places, but from that, she's gone from that to now being the queen of water in Garden City and Dodge City and working with all the groundwater management districts. And so we've started some of the really important work on protecting the aquifer. We've passed bipartisan legislation to do so. There is much more that we have to do, including just funding the water plan, which is something that had not been done until the Governor Kelly administration. The other specific things that we could do would be dead on arrival if we introduce them. And so any approach to address changes in extreme weather and all of these things that we're doing and acknowledging climate change is really important, but it's gonna have to be bipartisan. We're a weird state because we have wildfires and flooding and extreme weather, and we've seen an increase in tornado activity. We're seeing because of fracking, different earthquakes and things like that. And so it isn't a question of what we should do, it's how can we get it done. And we're seeing more and more folks on the other side of the aisle willing to address this issue alongside us.
The Kansas City Metro is expecting hundreds of thousands of visitors to the World Cup. Some of these fans have different customs, like eating a late dinner. I've heard the legislature is considering a bill allowing 24-hour alcohol sales during the World Cup. Is this happening? Can we expect the legislature to make allowances during this time to facilitate our visitor experience?
So just this week, Governor Kelly issued a disaster declaration ahead of the World Cup, which truly, and this next week, the legislature, I think that's only good for 14 or 15 days, and so the legislature will have to extend that through the end of July. But that allows the state to tap on federal resources and do anything, although the legislature did severely restrict the governor's powers with emergency management. And so it will allow us to tap into some federal resources, make some changes, and her legal team's looking into how much can they do with the disaster declaration. I think President Trump has granted each state so far that has declared that disaster declaration. And so we'll have to see what we can do through that and what we'll have to actually pass as legislation. You have Missouri who's wanting to pass things like Waymo, which is the autonomous vehicles. There's no way Waymo comes for the World Cup unless we pass it on the Kansas side as well. A lot of folks don't realize that when the matches are happening, they're actually oftentimes in the middle of the night, or luckily being in North America, we're in all the same time zones, but restaurants being open, alcohol sales, if we don't match Missouri, all those folks are going to be on the Missouri side rather than spending their money in Kansas.
There is also a concern, so I have been introducing a bill for years. was able to get myself through college by working in the service industry, primarily as a server. The tipped wage in Kansas is still $2.13 an hour. I think when that was put in place, that was in 1992. I was not old enough to vote yet. I was a freshman in high school. And so it has not been changed at all. Unfortunately, now, so here's the problem, is that when we're talking about different customs, a lot of folks from Europe, over in Europe, they don't have a tipped wage. A tipped wage, by the way, look up the history, it's based in slavery. There used to be no wage at all, and so recently freed folks would work just for tips and the owners would not pay them at all. So this sub-minimum wage, we have heard from business owners on the Missouri side, or on the Kansas side saying, please raise this. It is hard for us to hire people on the Kansas side when they can get a base wage of $5.50 on the Missouri side, but the rest of Kansas, as I said earlier, doesn't understand us and doesn't care, and so doesn't want to raise it because they don't understand the metro area issue. Now, I have spoken with Chair Mike Kelly. He says that there will be a strong education program to make sure that our tipped wage workers on the Kansas side are not doing a ton of work, but perhaps not getting tipped properly because people don't understand our, unfortunately terrible customs. We should be paying our workers, but we need to make sure that these workers are being taken care of. So educate your friends as much as possible to make sure that people are getting tipped, because they're going to be working hard and it's unacceptable for them not to be making money off of this.
And this kind of piggybacks on that. Do you think raising the Kansas minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 will pass versus even offering an adult versus, I think it's saying an adult over 18 versus a teen wage?
Yeah, so, I've been fighting to raise the minimum wage since I got in the Senate. I've introduced a bill every single year I've been in the Senate to raise the minimum wage. We currently have a bill in the Kansas Senate that would address, in addition to raising the wage up to 15 and then indexing it every year after that for inflation, would also address the tipped wage issue that Representative Clayton identified. And we have just had a real tough time getting this bill moving. I think it's wrong, and I just think, we have, our minimum wage is tethered to it is the lowest minimum wage of any state in the country because it is the federal minimum wage. So you cannot have a lower wage than Kansas allows. And I just think that is wrong. I just think that's immoral. I think hard work is one of our core values as Kansans, but I think it's wrong that anybody in Kansas who is working full-time could be living in poverty. I just think that's not who we want to be as a state. So I just think it's a moral imperative that we raise the minimum wage. We've all been working on that on both the House and Senate side, and we just want to keep, I think, raising the salience of the issue so we can hopefully get some movement on this in the legislature.
Sorry. What changes can we expect to see in public transit and bus systems?
So I touched on Waymo, and so that is, regardless of your feelings on it, is one of the things that is we're going to have to look at. I think it's a little creepy to be in a car that no one's driving. I'm going to test it out on one of my trips. But I think it has been a regional approach to those bus systems to go from the airport. In Lenexa City Center, we're the first stop on the route. And so I'm excited to see all the Argentinians and the Dutch come into Lenexa City Center. But part of our World Cup proposal also required us to be able to contract, and I wish Julie Lorenz was here that was working on that, and her folks over at the World Cup, because it was something like 75,000 rideshare drivers that they had to contract with. And so I know they're taking a rideshare approach, a bus approach. You'll see a lot of those big bus shuttles going through the loop. And yet at the same time, we are the smallest host city of the world's largest event in the history of the World Cup. And so I do think it's going to be an adjustment for all of us. And while we had to have the ability for almost, up to 80,000 hotel rooms within 2.5 hour drive, that's just for the official part of the Cup. And so I think going back to the disaster declaration, you have cities in Johnson County that are, you know, doing a patchwork of bans on short-term rentals, things like VRBO and Airbnb. And I think that part of the conversation you will see is temporarily allowing cities, preempting cities, which I don't like doing, but we do not have enough housing. And so allowing Kansans to be able to rent out their homes or their apartments is part of the ongoing discussions right now.
Is there a bill regarding ICE's authority in Kansas?
Yes, there are a few of them. But as happens, we can't really get any traction on them, unfortunately. There's a group of us that have been working behind the scenes for several months on crafting legislation to protect our immigrant communities and everyone else in our communities, frankly, from ICE. And you know, requiring that they are held to the same standards as our police officers and other law enforcement agencies, including not being allowed to wear masks and things like that. Unfortunately, as things go out there, we just can't get any movement on this. So we have been offering amendments to different legislation in order to get this conversation going, in order to get folks really paying attention to it and actually to try to make some movement on it. But as you know, we are the super minority, it is really difficult to get any of that through, and it's very unfortunate. Our immigrant communities deserve our protection and our respect. ICE is absolutely out of control. I don't believe they should be here whatsoever, frankly, and I know many others may have a different opinion. But the way in which they operate across the United States, as we've seen, they're basically just bounty hunters and vigilantes. And they need to stop murdering our people. They need to stop kidnapping our citizens. They need to stop hurting our children. They just need to stop. This is fascism right in front of our face. And we are trying our best to do something about it, but it is difficult at the state level. So I'm not trying to say, sweep it under the rug, you know, we aren't gonna get anything done. The thing is that we have to keep having these conversations and be brave enough to stand up for our immigrant community members and other non-citizens in our communities and our citizens. People are being taken just because of the color of their skin, just because of their accents, just because of their last name, and that is egregious, and it is disgusting, and it is anti-American, and we have to stop it. We are doing what we can. I know it's not enough. This breaks my heart every single day, but we're trying, and I want you all to know that.
What measures is the legislature taking to reduce gun violence in the state of Kansas, specifically firearms, suicides, and unintentional shootings?
I mean,
A little bit.
yeah, it's, well, okay, so Representative Meyer is the ranking member on the Federal and State Affairs Committee, which covers a lot of our gun-related laws. We did pass a bill out of committee that will allow for the voluntary surrender of firearms to, there are a number of firearms organizations, firearms businesses that allow for temporary storage. So let's say that you are a veteran, you inherited a bunch of guns from your family members, you're having trouble with PTSD, you're having trouble with suicidal ideation. You can voluntarily and temporarily surrender your firearms to these organizations so that they can safely store them for you. So that was, frankly, I was shocked that we were able to get movement on this, but this is an example of one bit of gun legislation that is actually positive, where we were able to get some real meaningful movement. I believe it'll probably go on the floor next week, but it passed out of committee with very little incident. And you know, things like safe storage laws, red flag laws, this is not that. It's not quite as good as that, but frankly, I have seen so much egregious gun violence, or gun bills in my time, that I'm grateful for what we can get. So it's nice to be able to tell you all about positive movement.
Yeah, thank you for that, Representative Clayton. So it was really nice to see this get through committee, and without a huge fight about it either, without a huge battle. And I'm very hopeful for it. It's you know, incrementalism isn't my favorite thing, but that's what we have to work with. And whatever we can do to protect people who are trying to relinquish their firearms temporarily so that they can protect themselves and their family members, and address their mental health concerns and their potential suicidal ideations is a step in the right direction. And it was very nice to see bipartisan support on this. I was surprised, but I am happy that we're actually getting something through.
We're gonna loop back to an environmental question. Would you support replacing corn ethanol fields with solar power generation and ending E85?
As the newbie on ag, this is something that if there was a bill that was going through the process, I'd love to learn more about the hearing and testimony. And I think oftentimes people think, we're the experts on all these things, and we're not, right? Every year, out of the 300 and something final action votes that we take, I'm probably the expert in the room on one of them. And so we do use those opportunities for hearings when they actually happen to be able to make informed decisions. And so I never running for a higher office, so we'll see. I know ethanol is one of those issues that can be pretty divisive, and so I would definitely look into what that economic impact is and environmental impact of that bill would be.
Can you give us an update on the special education funding and efforts to divert public dollars to private schools?
So our appropriations members in the House were working overtime. Well, all of our committees are at this point. It was what a chaotic week. But they were putting the budget together this week, and we will have it on the floor next week on Wednesday. And so I believe the Senate position is still no additional funding for special education. The House did have $10 million in it, which still takes us the wrong way. It doesn't get us closer to the 92% at all. But I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly, as I listened for several hours the last couple of days, that the House added an additional 10 million. So that's positive, and yet it's still not the governor proposed 56 million, I think, which would get us closer, I think, to 70% of excess cost, not the 92%. And folks, I think, sometimes hear the other side say, oh, our math is math, not mathing, and whatever. The reality is, if we're not meeting this 92% obligation, whether it's the Fed's fault or the state's fault, that is places like Olathe that are diverting funds that should be going to special education, but are having to cut other programs to be able to meet the obligation and truly just meet the needs of our students.
I would just say, I would recommend, if folks haven't read it yet, it was in the Casey Star, right? It was an op-ed from all of the superintendents from all the Johnson County public schools. And if you haven't read that yet, I would encourage this audience to read it, to share it, because they do an excellent job of just laying out, just in very plain English, what it means in practical terms for these districts to not have been receiving over a number of years the reimbursements that they should have received for special education. And this is far from just a Johnson County issue. I mean, it was very important to hear from them, but I think that you could apply the same sentiment that they shared and the same challenges that they're facing, whether that's in Wichita, whether that's in Western Kansas. This is really a statewide issue, and that column really does a good job laying it out. So I would just encourage you to read it and share it with folks in your networks.
I was going to add real quick, on Wednesday when we do the budget on the floor, you'll see several floor amendments offered to try to get us closer. They'll have their marching orders not to, but it's always interesting to see which Republicans do end up voting with us on that amendment. There are a few folks that do have kids that are in special education. You'll see them vote with us. You'll see some of the vulnerable suburban Republicans who see the election coming that will vote with us. And so we won't have enough to get to 63 to pass the amendment, but those will be roll called, and you'll be able to see how your members have voted.
Can you tell us about the Supreme Court issue voting for judges happening in August?
Well, I'll keep it very simple. Vote no. We're very good at doing that. So there has been a long history of this, and in fact, we've kept this off the ballot. I think it came up in 2015. I was a Republican then. Republican Stephanie didn't like it either. So the reason why I do not like the idea of politicizing the elections of our Supreme Court justices is that our founding fathers intended for us to have these three branches of government, and the judiciary is designed to be above or different than anything legislative or executive, right? It's supposed to be beyond the impartial judging of things as opposed to political. So what this will do, and you will notice that if you've looked up the ballot language, it's very confusing, and by design. We remember this from Value Them Both. It has a lot of double negatives, and what you're voting to do, a yes vote would say, oh, well, we're gonna put how judges, we'll make sure that judges will be elected, but the way that they're elected would be in the hands of the future legislature. So that's a concern because you don't know if you're voting for judges in districts, you don't know if you're doing that statewide, you don't know if you're doing that partisan, you don't know what those qualifications are. So currently, the system is very impartial and very pure, and that is the way that it should be. So that is the concern that we have. It'll be on your ballot. Vote no on August 4th, 2026. That's my best advice to you. We do not want our courts to be politicized. We need that purity kept in place.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that. I would add to that right now we have a system where justices are selected based on their ability, their legal reasoning skills, their legal writing skills, their analytical skills. And that is really what you want. I think folks sometimes forget that 99.9% of the cases that the Kansas Supreme Court hears are frankly very boring. They are very highly technical cases about obscure areas of law. And what you really want is the best legal minds in the state applying their ability to that. We have had a very strong Supreme Court of justices appointed by governors of both parties over a number of years. I think that we do not want to have justices who are running as members of a particular political party. I think that is gonna call into question, and maybe unfairly, but their ability to be impartial in certain number of the cases that will appear before them. I also think that it's anti-rural. We have for a number of years had some of our, I wouldn't say best, but I would say some of our most prominent and highly skilled justices have come from rural areas of Kansas. I think it's important that we have that perspective on the court. If you have a system where it's gonna come down to who can raise the most money, you are gonna have just a bunch of wealthy attorneys from Johnson County and Wichita on the court. And I don't think that serves the state as a whole very well. And the other thing is just the amount of outside money that this is gonna bring into our state. We had an election in Wisconsin that some of you may remember in April of 2025. There was over $100 million in outside spending. I just do not think that we want to bring that into Kansas. I think we have a good system. We don't need Elon Musk or George Soros or anybody from outside of Kansas trying to buy our justices. We should keep the system as it is.
It is 11, but I'd like to squeeze in one more question if we could, and maybe limit responses to one minute since we got started a little late. We have a couple questions about turnaround. So what is the most important bill in the greatest danger of not surviving turnaround? And then a similar question, what critical bills can we help advocate for or against as the legislature goes into turnaround week? And what is the best approach? Is it call, is it email, or something else?
We'll rapid fire this. Well, if you're ever in ailment, go to Topeka because nothing dies until they go home. So it's the best place to be. There's a number of procedural things that they can do. You're gonna see any of the priorities of the Republican Party will be sent to an exempt committee. So if it touches federal and state affairs, tax, calendar and printing, or appropriations, then it's alive for the rest of session. And you're gonna see on the last day of turnaround, dozens of bills that will be sent to those committees to keep them alive. For us, I think advocating against some of the bad extreme bills is really important. The question of should you call or should you email while we're in session, we have office assistants that are answering the phones and taking down those messages and passing those along to us in whatever format the legislator prefers. If you're emailing it, that is going directly to your legislator. So I would say during session, the best thing is to call and leave a message with very nice people who probably agree with you, but they're taking the phone call on behalf behalf of a member that maybe not doesn't agree with you. So while we're in session, do that because it's going to make sure they get it. Right now, we're getting hundreds of emails a day, so I don't want your email to get buried and lost. Outside of session, call, text, email.
All right, I would say that the issue that I am watching the most is the property tax issue, because I hear from people from all political stripes, from all areas in my legislative district, that they are facing major cost issues with property taxes, and very, prohibitive in that regard. The problem is that we have two different versions. We have a Senate version and a House version. Usually the House version is something I support, but then we had a hearing for it last week and it was like, ew, what is this? What has gone wrong? So we will work that bill in tax committee. It's a very important affordability bill. That is the one that I will be watching the most, because a lot of times when you introduce a base bill, it's like, I just see that as a jumping off point for negotiations. So we will see sort of what those various positions are, because really that is the main point of leverage between both chambers. Because for those of us that are up for election, and I guess, Senator, you are as well, so those of us that are on the ballot, that is what we are paying attention to, because that is what we are hearing from our constituents about, and that is really the ultimate point of leverage that will be used when it comes to other points. So that's what I'm watching. Also, you can text me, 205-4970. It's a 913. That's the best way to get me.
I'm watching several bills, and I don't really have a favorite that I'm watching, trying to stop or anything like that. Y'all know me, I'm gonna get up there and speak when I need to speak and my expertise is needed. I try to let others do the work when I don't have the expertise, because we can't be good at everything, right? But I would echo the sentiment that calls are actually preferred right now. Our emails are overwhelmed. I've got hundreds and hundreds of emails I still need to respond to. So if I haven't gotten to you yet, my apologies, but I'm doing my best. And just, let us know how you feel. And also, I think it's very important that even if you do not live in a legislator's district, but there's an issue that you're passionate about, that you see is coming up, and you think that maybe you have some information or a story that you could share with a legislator that may not be on your side, to reach out to them and do that. I don't know what's going on.
That is the fire alarm.
May I have your attention,
It
please?
is real.
May I have your attention, please?
Cool.
There's been a fire reported in the building.
We're gonna have to evacuate.
The nearest exit is
Okay.
Is that so people don't have to take questions from the public? Everyone can run off?
I don't know.
We can go out that door. That's the closest door. The emergency exit, the closest one is right here to the.
Brandon, I'm the one who asked about E85.
Oh, okay.
So
I'd love to grab coffee and talk more about it.
okay.
And I'm sorry I haven't been at the Lenexa ones the last couple of months.
There's a lot of folks that grumble about solar, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it's not the most efficient or reliable sort of thing. But there's something that's worse, and it's the ethanol. Ethanol is a way worse form of energy. If you look at the volume of land that it takes and what it actually produces, they harvest once a year.
Yeah.
Let's
get out of here.
And it's like, wow, we have all this land being used for ethanol all across the country.
Well, and I had an E85 flex fuel vehicle.
Yeah.
And I got seriously 100 less miles per gallon.
Yeah. I can try to leave anything behind over there. I guess just the Kleenex.
I don't see anybody.
But
So I just didn't use it because I was like,
you get better mileage on regular gas.
Right.
Yeah. I've got a plug-in hybrid car,
Uh-huh.
and it's actually less expensive to use gasoline.
Right.
I've measured
Oh, wow.
the dollars when using electric
versus
the dollars using gas,
the
and
bang for your buck.
gasoline is more effective. Oh man, and it's raining too.
Oh no. Well, that'll help if there is a fire.
It's a real fire alarm, but it's usually like the smoke detector detected.
Huh.
It usually takes at least 15 minutes.
So, why is it good for the people to vote for governor but not for judges? That struck me as a little bit hypocritical.
Yeah, my biggest fear on that one is what Stephanie, or I guess that was Ethan getting to it, is no, it was Stephanie.
That it'd be politicized,
We don't know what
right?
we're voting on though.
Well, yeah, but the legislature always writes the laws. No matter what thing gets passed,
Yeah.
the legislature always.
And I'm confident the moderates will pick up seats in August and we'll pick up seats in November. So I'm confident in the House's ability to oppose anything too egregious, but
Yeah.
I think at the same time, it's not broken.
Huh.
Do you
I mean,
think that
some people would say it's definitely super broken, right? I mean, like
if
a good,
they don't like to fund our public schools, or they don't like the reproductive rights to
like 40% of the state probably grumbles about the Supreme Court. I mean, you know that.
then that leaves 60% liking them.
Well, I mean, it may be more than 40. It could be like 51 or 55. We'll
We've
see.
never
But
had a justice not retain, have we? Because they still have to stand for retention.
that is true.
So we still keep them, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the coalition of no has got a lot of really good messaging,
Yeah.
and so we'll see.
Okay.
If it does pass, then I look forward to riding. Whether it's part of my biggest thing is I just don't want it to be partisan.
Yeah. That's the one thing people always ask for, though, is what party judges.